We're testing welders today. We've got a brand new multi-process welder
and a humongous 50-year-old MIG welder.
Does the new stuff really do a better job than the old stuff?
How much has technology changed in the last half century? We're going to be comparing these welders and some welding paraphernalia to see if this welder belongs in your garage or museum.
Let's get Miggy with it.
It's a big glob. Oh, wow, Jesus.
Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Can you move to your left a little bit? Ah, perfect. Sometimes I need to take my foot off the gas pedal and just slam down on the old artistic pedal. So I use Raycon's everyday earbuds to protect my artistic merit from the sounds of the world. Their optimized gel tips and in-ear fit allow me to break off from the stress of the garage and become absorbed in my work. And it's easy to navigate between sound modes. I can block all the outside noise with Raycon's noise isolation feature, or I can set it on awareness mode and still hear the world around me. Plus, they stay in your ear. And with over 50,000 five-star reviews, you know you're getting quality audio at half the price of those other top brands. If you want to buy your own pair, sprint over to buyraycon.com/donut to get 15% off your Raycon purchase, or just click the link in the description below. Now, if you don't know, there's more than one way to weld stuff, but today we're going to be focusing on MIG welding, which stands for metal inert gas. And it's probably the most common form of welding. And here's how it works in basic terms. You've got electricity coming through a weld wire that creates an arc, which melts the metal, creating a weld pool. That wire is being fed through your gun here, and it's also surrounded by an inert gas that protects the weld from oxidizing from the surrounding air. So that's how you get a nice clean weld, keeps spatter down, and makes them look real nice. MIG welding is one of the most common forms of welding that you'll see in a garage because it's relatively cheap and it works great for automotive applications.
Can't really go wrong with a MIG welder. You can do just about anything. You guys welded the roll cage on the Money Pit E36. Right. We did the bumpers on the low truck.
Welders have gotten really good, and this one is no exception, which is kind of how you justify the $4,000 cost. It makes it a lot easier to get good at something when you've got a good tool to do it with, and this welder is an awesome tool. All right, now that we've introduced our new welder, Nolan, I'd like to see you lay down some beads, brother.
All right, we're gonna lay some beads on this sheet metal right here.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna clean it off first with this grinder. We've got our safety gear on.
Yep.
So let's get to it. I can't hear you, Joe.
Oh, don't worry. One of the most important steps to getting a good weld is making sure the material you're working on is good and clean. This has some surface rust on it, so Nolan's gonna clean it up with a grinder real quick. Beautiful! All right, now that our workpiece is cleaned up and basically ready to weld, it's time to set the welder up. So like I said before, this welder does a lot of automatic settings for us, so you only gotta know a couple things. Basically the process that you're using, and in this case we're MIG welding, so you see it says MIG, we're welding steel, and C25 is just about the gas that we're using. The inert gas lives here in this tank, and then it automatically sets our voltage and our wire speed. Now you do have manual control over them if you want it, but this is always gonna be a good starting point, especially if you're not sure how to dial in a welder. This thing can get you going pretty easily. To actually create the arc needed to weld metal, you need to create a closed electrical circuit. You do that by running an electrical current between a grounded piece of metal and your welding torch. That electricity will then arc across the small gap between your torch and the metal in an attempt to keep the circuit closed. And that arc generates a ton of heat, up to 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is how you can melt metal. That's looking good, and you can see, it flows into the metal nicely. It doesn't look like it's separated or sitting on top of the metal. So it looks like it's, taking a nice bite into the metal. All right, Nolan, well, it didn't take too long, and you're laying down some pretty nice looking welds.
Thanks.
And I think you'd probably agree it was sort of easy.
Yeah.
Easy to set the welder up, easy to get to welding, and then, the welder does a good job, right? I'm very interested to see if it'll be as easy to use this monstrosity that we bought on eBay for $1,100. Unlike our new multi-process welder, this box here is really just a giant transformer. It supplies the electricity needed to weld to this smaller box, which then transfers the power and gas to our welding torch through these really long cables. And also, unlike our new welder, our weld wire is actually contained inside the gun, which is why it's so giant, heavy, and cumbersome. Back in the day, MIG welding was done like this. This is a spool gun, so the wire is actually in the gun. It lets you have super long cables, especially nice if you have a gigantic welder that you don't want to move around the shop all the time. but this does make the gun a fair bit clunkier.
Yeah, this thing looks like a mix between a Star Wars blaster and a Super 8 cannon. Pretty heavy compared to the modern torch.
While it doesn't have auto set features like the other one, the fact is there's not that many settings to tweak with. There's really two, basically. You've got this big knob here, and that controls our voltage, or the heat that's being plowed into the weld. And then on the gun itself, you've got wire speed settings. So just because it isn't super convenient doesn't mean that it's not a good tool and that it can't get the job done. So the question is, could that old welder do as good of a job as a new welder? This thing only runs on 240 volt electricity, which we don't have built into the garage here. So we had to get a generator, and we're gonna power this thing off of that generator. We're gonna fire this thing up, see what happens. Okay, here goes nothing.
Let's get her going. Oh, that is heavy.
Holy mackerel, that's splattery. Yuck! And you can tell there's so much spatter, and you can even see it just looks like you're piling wire on top of the metal.
All right, flash.
She might be tangled in there, or melted to the front. And that's where the problem started. Try as we might, tweaking the settings, we couldn't get a good weld. Nothing seemed to help. The spatter is insane. I mean, just the amount of hot metal balls flying off of that comparatively is crazy.
I'm gonna go from 38 to 40 here. There we go. That still looks like crap.
Getting closer, but yeah, I mean, that's rough. And we've tested all the settings, we've tweaked everything, and this is as good as we can get it, which makes me think something's wrong. But I think we've got an issue with our setup, and I think we need to do a little investigating. Now, we're gonna dive deeper into our old welder in a second, but first, let's talk safety. Masks and gloves are essential if you want to start welding, and they've come a long way since the 70s.
The reason for wearing a mask while welding is pretty obvious. The arc from your torch is technically brighter than the sun, so you gotta protect your eyes. But masks of the 70s were pretty rudimentary compared to today's technology.
I mean, this is like looking through a trash bag. I couldn't tell at all what you were doing, so I'm impressed that you could even do that. How much harder is it to see?
So much
It's
harder.
like blurry, it's too dark, kind of.
I mean, you can't even see out of the lens unless you flip it up. And once you know it, the clear lens is very dirty.
Do you feel safer when you crouch?
I can't fall as far. You know what I mean? Today's masks, they auto darken for you. You don't have to flip down this little visor here.
Look at the size of the element too. You get a lot more viewing area, right? You can see the light sensors there, and there. Those are waiting to see bright light. And as soon as it's triggered, it darkens the lens here, what you're looking through. So it can work for doing plasma cutting or grinding or welding. Great bit of kit. Way better than these. Changes the game. If you're still welding using an old helmet, treat yourself. Model number, primary, okay. After spending some time with our old welder, we finally figured out why we were having so many dang problems with it. The three-phase is basically electricity that has 3 alternating phases, right? Our generator is a single-phase 240 output. So when we were having those problems with the arc not being consistent and solid, that's because it's only getting 1 of 3 phases that it needs. We're just underpowering this thing like crazy, and I think once we get the proper generator, then it should weld a lot better. So we upgraded our tiny single-phase generator with this huge 300-amp diesel-powered generator capable of 3-phase power. Unlike single-phase, which operates with only 1 wave of alternating current, 3-phase power operates on 3 waves, each sending power slightly out of phase with one another, filling out the power delivery. Now, most things that require 3-phase power are going to use about 100 amps. But our 50-year-old welder only requires 30, so we thought that was a little bit weird, but still we hoped that our new big generator would solve the problem. Unfortunately, after hooking everything up, plugging in our welder, it doesn't even work at all now. It works worse than it did before.
Oh, wow, Jesus.
So we're gonna take our welder to the guys who own this generator. We're gonna take it to their shop and see if we can get things working there. So we sent our generator off to the pros, and after a little bit of tweaking, been a little bit of a struggle to get here.
Yep.
But if the welds are good, it'll all be worth it.
Is it on?
No.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Definitely much better. A lot smoother looking. You've still got some spatter, but that looks way better. These welds are looking pretty good, especially compared to when we were trying to run it on single phase.
So much better.
It does weld pretty well. It obviously took us a lot longer to dial in those settings than it does on the new welder. I'm ready to say this welder does a good job of welding, even if it is less convenient. But now I kind of want to see, you know, if we weld two pieces of metal together with both welders, which one will break easier?
Ooh.
With both welders up and running, it's finally time to see if this 50-year-old welder can keep up with our new one. We're gonna weld two pieces of metal together, and then we're gonna put them in our hydraulic press and try to break them. Best weld wins.
Well, we're only gonna do one side, because if we welded both sides of this, it'd be way too strong. We kind of actually do want to break the weld.
Yeah.
We want to do our best, but we want to be able to break it open and look at the differences between the two welds.
Nolan's gonna just run a bead across these. We'll take them to the press, see what happens.
We had the heat turned up pretty high, so it did kind of make a cavity right there, as you can see. Appearance-wise, it looks pretty good. If you look at it from the side, you can see that the puddle does make it about halfway down into the material.
Now let's go do the same thing with the new welder and see how that looks. How's that feel?
Oh my God, it's so light.
I know,
so
right?
easy. This is where it's at.
That sounded nice.
Felt
And
good.
it looks much prettier. Look at the lack of spatter.
I know. It was just a better welding experience overall.
It sounded great. It
Yeah.
sounded like a really consistent, crispy weld.
Okay, so here's with the old one. Here's with the new one. And just visually, new welder far superior. I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing how they stack up.
It looks pretty good and pretty similar. And you got to consider the crazy difference here. This is done with a massive generator pumping 3-phase power, and this is done with our wall outlet.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Interested to see how these fare in the press.
Yeah. We got our strap set up on the press here. We've got a piece of corner stock pressing on the weld. The weld is facing downwards, so we're gonna try to pull the weld apart like so. We got a pressure gauge on the press as well to monitor the pressure and see how much it takes before it snaps.
Yeah, and there's also the chance that it doesn't snap and that these welds are strong enough that they just bend and we can't really break them, which in that case, I mean, that's really good news.
All right, so this is the old weld. Let's see how well it does.
Starting to see a little bending at the weld.
Definitely bending.
And we're not really registering on the gauge. Oh, starting to creep up.
Yeah.
Getting close to a ton of force.
That's a ton?
Yep.
Oh man.
Each hash mark is a ton. So that's 1 ton. And we're bending, but it hasn't broken, which is good.
That wasn't the piece.
Yeah, it just slipped the mount out.
This metal's gonna bend before that breaks.
Yeah, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
That's the sign of a good weld, right? The metal around it bends rather than the joint breaking.
That's great. I'm a little surprised, but I guess I shouldn't be because again, the penetration was so good and we really put a lot of heat in that sucker, so.
I would say that's a pass right there. The weld didn't break, it just bent. So great job, Nolan. Great job, old welder. Now let's move on to the new one.
Okay, here's the new weld. Let's see how it does. If it breaks, it's gonna be very embarrassing. All right, already bending, holding at about half a ton. Not seeing any increase in the pressure. It's just bending the metal. It tells me that the weld is super strong and that the metal's gonna give before the weld does.
Well, boy, howdy.
Look at
That's
that.
2 solid welds. What do you think? Has welding technology come a long way?
Absolutely.
It's crazy,
I don't think
right?
there's any surprise there. Yeah, the form factor is a lot easier. It's just more ergonomic to use. Oh my God, it's so light.
The improvements are humongous.
So not exactly surprising that the technology has come a long way in 50 years. What is surprising is how well the old machine held up.
Yeah,
you know?
it did great. We managed to turn out 2 pretty similar results from 2 very dissimilar tools. So it's a little bit worse in every way, but it still welds pretty good.
Yeah. That being said, I want to go weld some more stuff.
Let's do it.
Follow Job at Zach Job. Follow me at Nolan J Sykes if you'd like. And remember to subscribe to Donut if you haven't already. Now go make something.
Let's find out. Don't talk about my facial hair. Shut up.
I like it.
Thank you. That's the only thing you're allowed to say about it.